With 300 new COVID cases in New South Wales, Tamworth, the latest regional centre to be locked down, and with a steady trickle of new cases into Melbourne, I don't think this Thursday will see an end to the 6th lockdown, even if there's been a reprieve for country Victorians today. It's easy enough, isn't it, to fixate on the pandemic to the exclusion of all else. In fact, I fear that's exactly what's happening with leaders preoccupied by COVID. Other portfolios and ministers, well, they've ground to a halt, and pandemic paralysis has derailed much of the other equally important work that governments need to get done. Just as worrying, things we should be watching closely are not getting the attention they deserve, and with parliaments shut down and oppositions effectively smothered by these long media conferences from state leaders, where's the scrutiny? Take this $3.3 billion blowout uncovered today in Daniel Andrews' signature infrastructure project, the new Westgate Tunnel for Melbourne. And this wasn't revealed, as it should have been, in the Premier's press conference earlier today, but instead seeped out in a report by a company to its investors. Now, this blowout, $3.3 billion, is almost 50% more an increase on the project's original cost. Of course, the project comes, doesn't it, with a tortured history. We'll get to that history in a moment, but it's also worth noting, alongside the potential hit to taxpayers today, was the sorry news that this project, which was originally due to be finished before the end of next year and was most recently supposed to be pushed out for another 3 years, well, now it's got no completion date. No date whatsoever. It gives money for nothing, doesn't it? Money for nothing, a whole new meaning. Now the history. You may remember that when Daniel Andrews was first elected, he tore up contracts signed by the former Napthine Liberal government to build the East-West link. Didn't matter that the construction was already underway. Andrews killed it off because he had a pre-election deal with the Greens. As a result, Victorian taxpayers were forced to pay out $1 billion in compensation for contract breach. $1 billion not to build a new and much-needed road. And in place of the cancelled East-West link, the Andrews government accepted a near substitute proposal from Transurban to build the Westgate Tunnel instead. But it was never the best option. And it's also turning out now to be another one of the Andrews government financial disasters inflicted on long-suffering Victorian taxpayers. Tunnel boring work was supposed to commence in 2019. That's 2 years ago. But the tunnel boring machines are reportedly idle still in a yard with no activity. There's been fights and legal disputes about what to do with toxic soil unearthed during the construction, all the while Victorians who thought they would have a road already open by now or close to it under the Napthine plan have still got nothing. And now it's a project that stalled before it's barely started, with a near $7 billion original cost now looking like it's well into $10 billion, and that problem with completion, no date. Hard to credit, isn't it? Just another blow to punch-drunk electors and taxpayers of Victoria. But this is a state government that wants to bring back, of course, tens of thousands of foreign students and bring back migration at the levels of a city the size of Canberra every 18 months before this infrastructure will be built. Now, as Australians, we've been living through lost 2 years when the issues that government should have been attending to, roads and dams and baseload power and new equipment for our military, all of that's been neglected by state and federal governments, totally preoccupied and consumed by this virus. But it's worse than a waste. We've actually gone backwards. Debt, mountainous debt, state and federal, $1 trillion in the federal case, debt you can't climb over and you won't climb over for a generation. It's all good and well to survive the virus, but if small business doesn't survive, I don't know who they think is going to be around long enough to pay the taxes when all of this is over. Because never forget, anyone in a government or public sector job, they don't actually pay tax. They just recycle taxpayer money. It's the private sector that bears the greatest burden. And at what point does the private sector say enough is enough?